Hello and welcome to PMI's Uncommon Sense podcast, tools to improve your work forever. I'm Susanna Clark, Managing Partner with PMI, the performance improvement consulting and training firm. Our Uncommon Sense podcast is a 15-minute conversation with our expert consultants. They talk a lot of common sense, although much of it is not common practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. We want you to be inspired to improve your business through learning more about the tools which can help you succeed and grow. Today, I'm delighted to be joined in Uncommon Sense Studio by Warren Knight. Thanks for giving up your time to speak to me today, Warren.
Oh, good to be here, Sus. Thank you.
So we are going to be talking about leadership today. And I think what would be really useful is for you to share your thinking on the theory of leadership and where it comes from and what's important for leaders to be paying attention to.
Okay. Well, Sus, when you first talked to me about these episodes, what immediately sprung to mind actually was the work of Dr. Deming. Most people will know Dr. Deming. If they know him at all, then they'll connect him with the world of quality, the quality movement and improvement.
Yeah.
But actually, his life's work was much deeper and broader than simply just quality. It was actually more around how organisations are led, about leadership, and later in his life, his accumulated learning was a set of thinking principles aimed at leaders to enable them to, in a sense, helicopter above their organisations and be able to see it from a much more effective, objective standpoint. He called these set of thinking principles the system of profound knowledge. And what I'd like to do is to explore these thinking principles in turn and just what leaders should be thinking about. So maybe let's start with systems thinking.
Okay, great. So I think it would be useful for our audience if you could give us a definition, if you like, of what is systems thinking.
Well, okay, systems thinking. Well, the first thing we need to do is understand, what is a system? Okay, so we normally think, when we think about a system, we normally think about an IT system. Well, that is one form of a system, but actually, it's a much broader thing. So one definition of a system is a set of interdependent components that work together to achieve the aim of that system.
Okay, and I really like the fact that has two parts to that description. In other words, it's not just the fact that it's a system of interdependent components, it is about them needing to achieve the aim of that organisation.
Absolutely, and actually, though, you've picked on the two things that really leaders need to pay attention to, in thinking about their organisation as a system. Actually, in my experience, unfortunately, most organisations don't operate as systems. They operate as heaps or piles. Okay, they're full of components, things, people, machines, equipment, money, all sorts of things. So they've got plenty of components, but the problem is they don't necessarily work together to the aims of the organisation. That's the problem, the fundamental challenge for leadership here. So if I was to express the role of leaders from a systems thinking perspective, it's about getting all parts of the organisation to play well together to the aims of the organisation.
Like an orchestra.
Like an orchestra, yeah. Because often we look at things and we tend to focus in on the quality of the components, making sure we got good quality people, good quality IT systems. Yep, but actually there's another component to this, and it's about how those quality assets actually interact and work together. And are they actually working in an aligned way in the same direction?
Okay. So can I ask, if I was a leader and I've heard what you've said, then where should I be looking and what should I be looking at to try and see if there is any hope that we might have that somewhere, if you like?
Okay, well let's go back to these two components about working together and the aim of the system. So let's start with the aim of the system. Okay, so I'm sure our listeners, I'm sure the leaders out there will recognise that a key ingredient of their role is to generate a vision for the organisation, and actually connected with other components of this system of profound knowledge that we'll talk about, particularly psychology later on, that idea of creating a shared vision for the future that everybody within the organisation can rally around and align to.
Okay.
Once you've got that vision, then it's really important that people understand it, and they understand how their work fits into the wider system and contributes to the attainment of that vision. And
yes.
Of course, we'd hope that vision, is the centre of that vision is around creating satisfying customers, because that's the fundamental purpose of the organisation.
Yes. Sometimes that's hard for people, isn't it? When you're sort of, in the middle of your work, as you say, actually you think that the purpose of your work is just to start with A and end up with a good B. Yeah. You're not necessarily having that wider connection to a vision.
Well, indeed, often, where our nose is to the grindstone, okay? And depending upon our role, we may actually be quite far removed from our customers of the organisation. Yeah. So this sense of imagine there's an organisation out there where no staff members understand their customers and what constitutes value in the customer's eyes. Imagine that kind of organisation. How effective would they be?
Yes, they wouldn't probably know necessarily, any impact of anything that they're doing would be having on the customer, I guess, as well as on perhaps their other parties within the organisation.
Yeah. And so, I create a kind of a very extreme example there. I would hope that most organisations, if not all organisations, know something about their customers and what constitutes value, but do they really understand? Okay, does everybody understand? Okay, in full detail, who their customers are and what value they're providing for those customers. And I think that's an improvement in itself.
Yes. Okay, so leaders need to be able to think and see their organisation as a system. They need to be able to communicate the vision. They need to make sure that vision's understandable and that everyone in the system understands that vision and therefore also that they can connect that vision to the specifics of the work that they do and see that in terms of the customer and the value that they're bringing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of course, maybe not of course. So in my humble opinion, a successful organisation is an organisation that makes its customers successful.
Yes. So if you're a leader of an organisation and you've created your vision, you've shared it and communicated it, and you believe that people understand that vision, what are the things that a leader should be looking at next in order to ensure, how do you get that comfort that the people who are doing the work have connected that to their work and the value that they're bringing to the customers?
Well, let's work on the basis that communication, it's more than communication. It's a process of engaging people. There's dialogue that has to be had. It's simply not a case of, passing around some flash PowerPoint slides and hoping that people understand it. There's a whole process of engagement and learning that has to go on. But let's assume that staff are getting that. They're getting the vision. They're getting this idea that how their work is connected with that. So let's move on to the second part, which is about the leader ensuring then that people play well together.
Yes.
So obviously, most organisations are large enough, in a sense that they have to be broken down into groups. They have to be structured in order to just manage them and control them. And of course, we recognise that organisational structure as being departments, as being functions that have a particular role, within the kind of engine room of the organisation. And it's quite right that we should organise around the kind of tasks that people do. That makes perfect sense. But the next part is how do we make sure that people remained aligned with that vision? So we typically do that. A common sense way of doing that is to set a number of objectives.
Okay.
And measures associated with that. So, every department, I'm sure all our listeners within their department, they will have a set of goals, a set of targets, and a set of metrics to help them understand how well they're moving towards that vision.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that those metrics in reality need to be, and the goals associated with them need to be set based upon cause and effect rather than who does the work.
Okay,
and this is where actually it's probably not common sense. Okay.
I like your link to the title of the podcast. Very good.
I thought I'd done well there. Because common sense would say, so let's take a situation. So we're talking about an organisation, and within that organisation we have two departments. We have one which is customer services. So what part of customer services role is to bring on new customers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they'll bring on new customers, and within that, bringing them on board, they'll have a discussion with the customer to understand their requirements and understand the best structure of payment for that customer, for the services that they're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere else in the organisation, you've got a department that deals with revenue collection, debt. Okay. And so it would be common sense to put targets on the debt collection department to manage debt, the amount of debt that the organisation holds, because they're the debt collectors, they do the work. So surely their work influences the level of debt in the organisation. Not necessarily so.
Okay.
Actually, if you think about it, the cause of that debt is actually upstream in the customer services department, because it's the customer services department that is bringing this particular customer on board. So is allowing that debt to happen in the first place. Okay, and also that will be influenced by the conversation that they have around, how much the customer can afford to pay, and making sure that they got the right payment plan and the right payment methods.
Yes.
Yeah, but the target be on the debt department, not the customer services department. So, Suze, what do we think is on the mind of the customer service department? Do you think it's managing the debt?
No, I would imagine it's onboarding new customers.
Absolutely. They don't care about the debt. It's not their problem. The hole's not in their end of the boat.
Yes.
Yeah? So actually, and this is really somewhere where leaders can get a lot of traction, is thinking very carefully about the targets and the metrics that we apply in our organisations, because they can either encourage departments to work together, or they can actually encourage departments to essentially compete and work against each other.
Yes. Well, that's a great example. I really like that example. really conscious that we could actually talk all day about systems thinking. It's such a vast topic. Is there a book, any point of reference you would recommend our listeners have a read of perhaps, for more information on this?
Well, actually, Suze, a good starting place would actually be a book by Dr. Deming called The New Economics. Okay. It was a book that he wrote late in his life, in his career, and it was the first place that he articulated the system of profound knowledge. And it's a really great starting point. It's not a technical book, but it does raise these uncommon sense challenges in a very, very nice way. So that would be my recommendation.
Fabulous. Warren, thank you very much for that. That was really interesting, and you've piqued our audience's interest, I'm sure, for thinking about that systems thinking and the effect that it can have. Really, really good. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us. You can find more episodes of our Uncommon Sense Tools to Improve Your Work Forever in our Knowledge Hub on our website, or, of course, your favourite podcast platform. And do subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode, where you'll find links to more content on this topic, which includes webinar recordings, toolbox guides, blogs, and infographics, and our training page. You can always drop us a line on team@pmi.co.uk and arrange a time to have a call to talk about how these tools can help you in your organisation. We'd really love to hear from you.